Appreciate that introduction. These are my vitals up here. Certainly, I'm available anytime that I'm here, but if we don't catch each other and you want to talk some more, then certainly over the phone or email is completely fine. We'd love to hear from you. And it's certainly one of the things we really encourage if you are thinking of applying, or if you're looking after people who are applying, then we really encourage applicants to get in touch with us and really talk about your project ideas so we can really help you to align up with the needs of the scheme and make sure that you're eligible. So the purpose of today is the purpose of today is to let you know that there is an ACCAN Grants Scheme. Sorry. So I want to tell you that the ACCAN Grants Scheme exists. We do have money to give away. Our next round starts in February next year. So I want to flag that with you. I want to help you get a sense of what ACCAN's priorities are, the types of projects we're looking for, and really to answer any questions that you as a potential applicant might have about whether your project fits our scheme. So that's my main purpose. About me, I'm Tanya Karliychuk, as Katrina mentioned. So I'm the Grants and Research Officer at ACCAN. So I help to administer the scheme. We also have a separate bucket of money that is for commissioned work. So we commission researchers to study particular topics that we're particularly interested in. But that's separate to the grants program, which is independent. So next, one caveat for this talk is our grants program at the moment is undergoing some change. So ACCAN and the grants program is funded by the Department of Communications and the Arts. So it's a federally funded program. ACCAN is funded for 5 years at a time. It comes via a levy on the telcos under Section 593 of the Telecommunications Act. We were last reviewed right at the end of 2016, and as part of that review, a lot of change was initiated into the grants program. Basically, we've done so well for the first 10 years that the department was really willing to make the grant scheme a whole lot more flexible. So what I don't want you to do is go onto our website and see how all the other projects in the past have been running and how much they were funded for and apply for those amounts. What I want you to do is really keep an open mind about the possibility for a whole lot more flexibility for next year. So in the past we've had a $60,000 cap on projects, for example. That no longer exists. And I'm just conscious of researchers often, go and suss out the organisation. You'll go onto our website, see that a lot of projects were funded for that 50-60 mark, and then you'll apply for that amount. We don't want you to do that. We want you to apply for larger amounts now. The scheme is open to basically anybody with an ABN. So that can be university researchers, that can be private research companies, industry, community groups in particular, which are particularly keen to support. If you have partnerships with community groups, that's generally very highly looked on. And next year we are opening the scheme into 2 streams. So we fund any sort of research, education or representation projects. But they're going to be split into 2 streams. One is the research for some slightly larger amounts of money, and the second stream will be representation and education projects. And that's really where we hope to see a lot of the community groups, if not the lead, then really demonstrate a really strong partnership with those community groups in there. And I certainly don't expect to take an hour of your time today, so hopefully we'll have plenty of time to chat, and if anyone else comes as well with them. So, the ACCAN scheme for us is, even though we get this money from the department and we're administering it on their behalf, we really take a lot of ownership in this scheme. And for us, we really see it as a way for us to really increase our evidence base for the policy work that we do. So we represent consumers. ACCAN is the peak body for telecommunications consumers in Australia. We do a lot of work with government. We make a lot of submissions around telecommunications policy and regulation in Australia. We also produce a lot of tip sheets, fact sheets, other resources directly aimed at the consumer to help them navigate the phone and internet market in Australia. So that's about how to avoid bill shock, how to choose a mobile phone plan. For cold communities, for example, there'll be extra resources in language, or issues that we've faced with privacy policies, for example, or how telcos present information to consumers. So what we're really looking for is projects that really make the marketplace better for the telecommunications consumer. So i.e. you and I, in how we are able to access phone and internet services in Australia. And I will come back to that about exactly what that means and give you some examples, because I've already had one person leave because once she understood that distinction about what kind of consumer we're looking at, she's realised that that's not her place. We are really looking for real outcomes for consumers, so we do really want outputs from projects that are very concrete. As you see at the back, a lot of people do produce a report, which is wonderful, and that always goes up on our website. We can use recommendations from that in our work to government, for example. But if you're producing consumer resources as well, or things that, for example, can be shared with other groups to use, so you develop a resource or a program that then can be shared with others, also a really star point for you, because what we are really about is trying to scale whatever that you're trying to do. So if you've got plans or opportunities to be able to, you don't have to do the work, but obviously just make that your program available for others to use, then that's exactly what we're after. I've said a little bit of this before, but the grant scheme has been going since 2010. We've had nearly 500 applications in that time. It's 250,000 a year indexed, so we're up to about 275 a year at the moment, but next year, due to a bit of a quirk in the rollover, we have 390,000 available. We tend to try and get a cross-section of beneficiaries, if that's the word you like to use. So we won't, generally the panel won't choose all projects in one particular area, so it won't all be cold communities, or it won't all be small business projects, or it won't all be general consumers. There usually is a range that's chosen out of those. We did trying to clarify exactly, how your project will fit into our scheme is important to us, because nobody wants to spend hours and hours. It's a big effort, obviously, to put an application form. Even though ours is probably a whole lot easier than most. But we did have, we do have several ineligible applications, each year. And what we're really wanting to do is really help them to understand what our scheme's about, so that you and us both can avoid that time. So last year we had 9 out of the 41 eligible applications funded. So it's not a huge rate, but
it's about little less than 35% success rate, in other words. And if you look at the amount, 75,000 total, is it correct?
Yeah.
For 9 applicants, it's roughly about, say, 30. Just trying to give an average, like 30,000 per application. I mean, of course, it can vary.
Yes.
Somebody may be getting 5, somebody may be getting 100,000. That's, on average, it looks like that's the range.
Yes, but now that you've brought that up, so this year's round, for example, you could apply for any amount up to 275,000, and the panel may choose one $275,000 project or multiple ones of smaller amounts. So we do have a project that's $5,000. We also have projects which are 60, 70, 80. The difference, though, coming into next year is that we may, and these are yet to be confirmed, but we may be asking for particular bands of money. So we may be offering, for example, one $100,000 project over 2 years and two $50,000 projects over 1 year, and you apply to that amount. So that's one of the things to look out for. Even if we don't do it with that banding way, you will be able to apply for up to I think in the research scheme, for example, research stream, you know, I think you'll be able to apply for up to $200,000 if we don't do the banding. You know, we'll be looking for those larger projects over a couple of years in duration. Because so I'm reticent to talk about averages because it's not really very meaningful for our scheme. It's very
and these projects must be starting and finishing within that financial year or 1 year?
So for example, next year the round for applications will open in February, the funding beginning in July 1st, and then it goes fin year to fin year. So if you have a 1 year project, it'll go for the 19-20 financial year. If it's a 2 year project, then 19-20-21 financial year.
Okay, and it's only one call per year?
Yes. We have played with the idea of having a rolling round for you know, emerging issues or issues that we want looked at particularly quickly, but we haven't gotten there yet. That's going to be some time in the future. So this is some of the work that we do. You know, better mobile coverage, regulation, information about products and services. So, for example, we know that consumers, and particularly some sectors of the community, really struggle to understand their mobile phone contract, or you know, what's actually, you know, how do you actually compare mobile phone plans or internet plans when, you know, all the ads are telling you one thing, but you know, there's a lot of confusion out there in the marketplace. So providing better information is something that we do. And what we really want is projects that add or complement to our existing knowledge. So you'll see on our website, you know, a whole lot of projects that have already been done. And obviously we're not the only person, not the only group in this space. But if you can add and complement to that work, then that's the kind of thing we're after.
Yeah, so your objective of ACCAN is having better coverage. I mean, you have like 5 points here, and I assume this means for normal, complex, and also crisis conflicts, like emergencies.
Yep. Yep.
Have you supported anything on emergencies?
Not yet. We did get an application last year around emergency bushfire responses, so that's certainly an area that we'd be very interested in. It's not part of our policy work at the moment, but you know, we do fund other projects, you know, which are interesting in their own right and important. So I'd certainly be keen to talk to you about that.
Yeah.
So you two work together, is that right?
Yeah. This year, you know, cyclone impacted Darwin after several years on March 17, and after 2 days, Chief Minister of Darwin posted on his Twitter his own photo on the middle of the highway, elevated one, saying that finally able to get some network. So that shows with the category 2 cyclone, which was not really necessarily extremely severe in nature, and with the history of Darwin being impacted by the severe cyclones of maybe double or more than double the wind speeds 43 years ago, it's a case of lessons learned, not learned, but also our questioning the resilientness of the infrastructure itself.
Okay, that would be really good. Yeah, that would certainly be in line with what we're looking for. We did do a project a few years ago on the Warrnambool exchange fire. So just as the NBN was starting to roll out, Warrnambool was one of the first areas to get NBN, and the exchange down there had a fire, a massive fire. It may have been part of a bushfire. And they looked at what the response was to that and some of the issues that came up from that. So you might want to have a look at that report as well, and you know, see some of the things that came out of that. But yeah, definitely. And obviously, it wouldn't be just, you know, Darwin related. You know, whatever your findings are, or you know, they can obviously be applied to many contexts in Australia, given natural disasters.
And I think sometimes in the middle of third week of May, there was a huge concern regarding, you know, many people were not able to dial 000. Was it Sydney or something?
There was that.
No.
That's right, there was a problem in one of the Telstra bits which actually took out some of the 000 capability. And so, yeah, that's a major problem.
It was a major thing, and 000 is, I mean, it could be personal emergency, it could be a disaster situation, fire, police emergency, ambulance, and
Yeah.
so we can take up those.
I think you should. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That'd be great. Yes. So that's just to give you a bit of an idea. I just remembered that the camera's on me and I was walking away over there. So apologies to the camera. Yes, because the findings from this kind of work we really like to use in our policy work, so that's what we are after. Things you should know about the program. So it's an independent program. It's assessed outside of ACCAN, and that means that the grants team within ACCAN, which is me and my supervisor, are available to help you. So it's in our interest, and we're really keen to speak to applicants before they actually press the submit button, and really help you to refine your application, because we know a lot about the scheme. We know a lot about how the priorities are assessed. At the end of the day, we don't have any say in it. We don't get to contribute to that discussion, but it does mean that we can help you. So get in touch, phone us, email us, whatever. I do have people who give us drafts of their application for us to go through. I'm more than happy to do that if you give us enough time. But a lot of people really find that useful, and it also, again, helps you to weed out if your application was just never going to have a chance because it's not eligible. You're better off knowing that now rather than when you get a polite letter from us saying sorry but no thanks.
So I was going to ask, what were the reasons that some of the applications were ineligible?
It was mostly it's because of being out of scope. So I'm going to talk about exactly what our projects would be within our remit, and because that's a major issue. Not a major issue, but certainly one that I want to say people work on. So I'll just go through this for now. We are a very hands-on funder. As I said, we really see this as useful to our work. So we do hope for a lot of engagement during the course of projects, and have a lot of meetings. We'll come and see you in person if we can, if we're travelling interstate, and we'll often try that. We do take accessibility very seriously, so one of our major philosophies is that communications should be accessible to all, so regardless of vision impairment, any other disability. So any outputs that are produced from the scheme are also made to be accessible, so that means for written material, for example, we'll always have a Word version available, so that if you're using a screen reader, that's all usually much easier to read. We have templates that we give to our researchers as well to write into, which are already have those accessibility requirements built in, and you just have to type in, and you will have an accessible document. We have a standard deed, which is available already on our website, and we send that to, we're able to send that to you at any time, so you can look at it if you feel like you or your university needs to look at that first, then have a look at that.
It's like an agreement or a
Yeah, the contract. Yeah.
contract.
Yeah. So it is, the ACCAN scheme is not a gift. It is based on particular agreed milestones. So in that deed negotiation, we will actually take your application, see what you've promised in there, because that's what you've been assessed on, and then really break those down into set milestones, a timeline that you agree to and that you are expected to achieve within the course of the project. We know that things happen all the time in projects, and things change or need to change, or you want to change based on findings that you're coming across. That flexibility is there. We just need to have an audit trail for those. So we need to give you that permission in writing. We also notify the Department of Communications that there are these adjustments happening to a project. For you guys, that shouldn't be an issue. You just come and talk to us. Don't let us surprise. But we can always make that happen for you. And that's our website there. All of our past projects and outputs are there, but again, there's no need to fit into the kind of projects that are already there because of this increased flexibility to the scheme. And we do have a mailing list, so either leave me your email address, or if you go onto our website, there's a way to sign up there. And this is our most recent panel: Jared Goggin, Ellie Reddy, Robin Eckerman, all with a lot of experience in the sector. Gerard's term has already finished, so there will be some changes to the panel next year, but that's who you're trying to impress.
So these three people have a very strong communications background.
That's right. So they're all telecommunications professionals. So Robin, for example, has been working in the regulatory and engineering space side of it. Both Gerard and Ellie are from the university sector. Ellie in particular has a lot of community background. She's at the forum over at Malnan at the moment. And Gerard too. Gerard in particular on communications for people with disabilities. So, and because there will be an opening to our panel, you're certainly welcome to keep us in mind as well. If anyone's interested in being on the panel, then we can also send you the application for that. That will be happening later in the year. Okay, so I mentioned that these are the three types of projects. Obviously, projects aren't always just one. You know, they might have multiple components, but education, representation, and research. So the first two will likely be part of their own stream, and research will be part of a separate stream. Just to ensure that community groups are able to compete on a level playing field. So this is getting back to your question about the kinds of projects and what makes a consumer project. So the majority of projects which are ruled ineligible are because they don't actually fit our scope. You know, they're not actually a consumer telecommunications project. So when I talk about a telecommunications consumer, that's a consumer who is not just using the internet to buy stuff, it's buying internet and phone. So, you know, the purchase, the use of internet and phone services in Australia. Your project can be aimed at general consumers, or it can be around particular groups, such as those. And your project addresses a systemic issue, so it's it's something that if you were able to address in your project, or work some way towards fixing, it would make the telecommunication services in Australia work better for consumers. And for the life of me, I couldn't find a tick, so you've got a smiley face on this next slide. So as an example, if you were helping core communities find culturally relevant local services, wouldn't be eligible. Great project, but wouldn't be eligible. If you were helping core communities find culturally relevant info on how to choose a mobile phone plan, that's in scope, because you're helping a particular sector of the community to navigate the phone and internet space in Australia. Even more brownie points if you are helping this one particular core community over here, and your resources can then be made public and shared and available to other community groups to use, even better. Does that help explain the difference?
Yes, yeah.
Culturally relevant local services. That's not appropriate topic. First one.
Yeah, that's...
No, so if you're making an app or building a website, for example, it helps a group to find, local restaurants and local, car washes and local libraries. No, it's not in scope. If you were helping them to find information on how to make a complaint to the TIO, or if you were creating resources which make it better for them to lobby their own interests in getting, fairer plans on the marketplace, or how to think critically about advertising. When a plan says that it's unlimited data, is it really unlimited? What kind of questions do you need to ask? And that kind of resource might be presented to a core community or to a Aboriginal community a little bit differently to general consumers. That's definitely the kind of work that we're looking for. And then you've got the other scale, that you're working directly with policymakers or other academics, where you're really trying to establish a good database, of data. That's also within scope. This is more kind of a direct consumer outputs. Are there any questions around that?
So a person can actually visit ACCAN website and can compare the mobile phone plans, for example. That facility is available.
We have tip sheets there, for example, which help you to know how to compare and the kinds of questions that you ask, for example. So that's the kind of information that we provide. We have a top tips pack, for example, of how to choose broadband services. You know, what kind of service do you need? How do you make it? How do you help it work better in your home? You know, what kind of, where do you put the modem, for example? You know, how to understand the different types of technology. Or if you're not satisfied with your provider, what choices do you have? If you want to take a complaint further, you know, how do you do that to your provider, but also, you know, so that people know that they can take it to the telecommunications industry if they want to.
Okay.
So while we, you know, I mean, we're not in a position to, you know, advocate for any particular plan. Sometimes we do for particular communities. So for rural communities, for example, that choice is much more limited. The commercial choice is much more limited, so it's kind of easier to see where the gaps are in plans for those kind of communities. But generally, it's information about how to make those decisions. So I know you've already had a look at the back there of some of our past reports. So as I said, we have a template. We help publish the report. We generally print hard copies as well as making it available online under open licensing. Obviously, there is, you know, a whole range of outputs that you could be producing. You know, if you're wanting to a website or an app or fact sheets. QRAM, which is the Queensland Remote Aboriginal Media Group, they made a whole series of posters in various Indigenous languages to use in the community, but also they also produced audio about phone and internet topics that was then broadcast on community radio stations in the outback. So from memory, it was about, because my Arante is not the best, it was about how to choose mobile phones, how to avoid bill shock, and if you've got a problem with your mobile phone, what do you do? Where do you go? Finding Peace of Mind was an interesting one. It was looking at mental health apps and the privacy and security issues within them. So this is obviously a growing concern for telecommunications consumers, because you and I and our data about us and about how we use our phones and what content we're looking at, and all of our personal data is a commodity now and is being used and sought by third parties all over the place wherever they can get their hands on to use it. So that was a really interesting project. Here is some more. So we also did some work with the University of Melbourne around 3D printing. That was when, that was all emerging as, it's certainly just becoming more mainstream, that you could go down to the shop for $400 and buy yourself a simple 3D printing machine. But the law has not caught up to that technology, as it hasn't for many types of technologies. So it was really kind of a resource to help people and policymakers to understand what the issues are and what you need to be thinking about if you are going to go into this space. How you download a plan off the internet. Can you 3D print a gun? Can you 3D print something else that could be used for nefarious purposes? I know that this is far too small to read, but this is from the ANU, some infographics that were produced around identity theft. They actually produced a series of 3 reports. One was this massive literature review about the legal implications of identity theft in Australia. One was actually looking at the data that they had collected, and the last was the interpretation of that, the analysis of what consumers should be doing and thinking about when they are using their mobile phone services and how to protect themselves from identity theft. But so, there's a whole range of different projects that you could do, and certainly, the way that phones and internet work in disaster times, especially with the NBN, for example, and what happens when the power goes out, for example. It's a major issue for communities. I know that I live in a semi-rural area and certainly have that concern. If there's a fire, our phone is going to go out, and not just our phone, our water goes out as well because we're on an electric pump. So, you know, there are certainly issues there to be thinking about. Nearly finished. So that's the summary of what we think the scheme will look like next year. There will be priority areas for next year, so there might be 4 or 5 particular topics that we'll particularly be interested in, and that's brought together from, you know, consulting with both ourselves but also industry and government. And that will be released later in the year. That doesn't mean that you're restricted only to those topics, it just means that you know, they will be particularly looked at. Yeah, that's kind of where we're up to really. We've already done a little bit of that, but I was, you know, wanted to make myself available to talk through. Perhaps we should talk a little bit more about your project idea before you go, just to, you know, if there's anything else I can input to help you in your thinking. But otherwise, that's